Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to Vlog 69, Academic Mobility. This vlog builds on our last session that investigated the precariat and the precarious nature of higher education employment and also employment in the workforce beyond our universities. Today, through academic mobility and the great ideas of John Urry, we're going to provide some solutions for you. So yes, we're going to look at the nature of mobility and also two other key concepts. We're going to look at labour surplus and the double freedom. Particularly, I want to explore the strengths and the challenges and weaknesses of academic mobility. But first, I thought we'd just take a pause and think about the nature of mobility. How much of your life is based around moving? If you think about it, transportation systems are based on moving our bodies through space and time. We have a whole series of communication systems, like our mobile phones, that move our ideas through space and time. We have a whole series of popular cultural platforms like the iPad and a series of tablets that move images and music and screen and sound through the spaces and the edges of our lives. Terrific. So mobility is amazing. But also post-September 11, there's a whole series of immobilities that we have to now negotiate, and terrorism has made it more difficult to move through space and time. So not surprisingly, considering the nature of mobility and movement, mobility studies has become, in the last 20 years, a really interesting interdisciplinary paradigm to watch. And this interdisciplinary paradigm was formed by the late and great Professor John Urry. He created CMORE, the Centre for Mobility Research at Lancaster University in the north of England. So John Urry was very focused on a whole series of different mobilities: imaginative mobilities, virtual mobilities, how we move our bodies through space and time, and also communicative mobilities. The mobility studies crew are basically interested in how people and ideas and money move through space. And the reason for that is mobility has become the new marker for both class and power. Those who hold power can move. Those lacking power cannot. So for those of you who have an interest in globalization, you see where these ideas are moving. The powerful corporations, the powerful companies, the powerful individuals can move through space and time, build a business using a cheap, immobile workforce, and then they're able to take those goods and export them around the world. So it's all working well for some. So what I'm arguing is mobility creates power, and mobility creates choices. So the immobile are disempowered, and the disempowered are immobile. So let's now apply this idea, this concept, this whole new interdisciplinary paradigm to you in Adelaide and you in South Australia. Now, have you got particular limitations, family limitations or family circumstances that are locking you in to living and working in Adelaide? And that's fine. It's important that you acknowledge that. But if you can only live and work in Adelaide, then you're only choosing between 4 universities. If you're happy to live and move anywhere within Australia, then you have 43 universities to choose from. So you can see what even a little bit of mobility can give you. It can give you choices. So if you are prepared to move, then you will increase your choices and you will increase your power. So next I'm going to talk about why mobility matters so much to PhD students in particular. And to do this, I'm going to use 2 concepts from Karl Marx, one of Groucho's brothers. These ideas from Karl Marx actually have more resonance now than they did even in the 19th century. And they are labour surplus and the double freedom. So labour surplus refers to the lived reality of everybody, that there are simply more qualified people available for every job than there are jobs available. So more people are available than jobs. That is labour surplus. And of course, degree inflation makes this issue even more complex. There has never been in history more people with a bachelor degree, more people with a master's degree, more people with a PhD. Now, most of our grandparents did not have a degree. We're now at the point where for people under 25, nearly 50% of that particular cohort have a degree. And so therefore a degree has never meant more, but it's also never meant less. So if you don't have a bachelor degree, then every single job you apply for, you will be in the bottom half of the people applying for that post. But it also means that there are more people with bachelors and masters and PhDs than ever before in history. So every job you apply for, even with a PhD, you will find other people who are equally qualified. Now that's labour surplus. And the impact of labour surplus is that wages reduce and workers are prepared to accept much lower conditions of employment so they can just get that job. Now, this may seem to increase our powerlessness and reduce our choices, and it may do, but let's add one more variable to this. We see a lot of the consequences, I think, of this labour surplus, particularly in Europe and in North America, with 0-hour contracts, part-time work, casualised work. So people are simply prepared to accept really low conditions so they can just get an income. Okay. So all of us know that we're going to have to accept some conditions in the workplace that we wouldn't have to have accepted, and indeed wouldn't have accepted a decade ago. And that has particular consequences for PhD students. Let me just give you some statistics on this. So a graduate assistant at Yale for 9 months of work has gained a salary of $20,000. A Yale professor over that same 9 months earns $109,000. In Canada, 80% of postdocs earn less than $38,000 a year before tax. And can I say, in Canada, both direct and indirect tax levels are pretty high. So PhD students and postdocs boost radically the research capacity of universities, and they do so very cheaply. But Marx gave us another concept that will provide some options for you, and that is the double freedom. Double freedom. So all of us have only our labour power to sell. That is the first freedom. We have our labour power to sell. But we do have a second freedom, and that is we can sell that labour power to anyone. So we only have our labour power to sell, but we can sell it to anyone. That's the double freedom. And that means our greatest freedom comes from the capacity to sell our labour to a diversity of employers. And that's why mobility matters, because mobility gives you freedom, the double freedom, so you can improve your wages, improve your conditions, improve your life. So if we only have a field of employers of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, then we haven't got a lot of choice there. But when we increase the field of employers to 30, to 300 or to 3,000, then suddenly and radically we can improve our salary and improve our conditions. It's never been easier to search internationally for work. LinkedIn and Seek are simply 2 examples, and all of us have mates all around the world. Make sure they tell you about posts that are coming up around the world. Okay, so we've talked about mobility, we've talked about labour surplus, we've talked about the double freedom. Let's now get into this and apply these concepts to your academic life. You've always heard me say this, that at our best, all of us should live locally, but intellectually we must live and think internationally. So internationalisation should always be a part of academic life. We go to conferences, we have all sorts of visiting posts that are available to us, and we work with international colleagues around the world. Scholars have always done this. But mobility remains the great gift to academics and to our PhD students because it enables internationalisation. That's why I'm so focused on internationalisation, guys, because it's about maintaining high standards and international transparency and quality assurance. So you're just not getting a good PhD in Adelaide, you're getting a good PhD full stop. And that's why you have international examiners on your PhD. And all sorts of programs like Fulbright, like Commonwealth scholarships are available to enable that academic mobility. But the actual point is the best universities in the world attract the highest and the largest concentration of international, inverted commas, foreign workers in their university because they can get a very large international field for every post and they're able to attract the best scholars in the world who want to work there. So why would an individual academic decide to migrate? Well, there was a great study conducted by Van der Welt at Amsterdam University College, and she found that the reason that academics travel is, yes, to increase their salary, but also, particularly for the harder sciences, to increase the infrastructure and the funding, but also to get away. So there could be political tensions, that's another push-pull factor, but also geographical proximity, so movement between, say, the Scandinavian countries, and also linguistic ability. So if we speak French, if we speak German, if we speak Italian, we speak Indonesian, that's an ability to move around the world to those countries that speak those languages. So there are other reasons that people move that are studied a lot less frequently, and they are, for example, the need to get a job, the need to improve conditions, and the need to gain a promotion. So these tend to be quite quiet and hyper-personal decisions. One of these hyper-personal, quiet elements that's undercooked in the media is that women particularly move for very different reasons. So women are rarely promoted to professor within their home university. So if a woman is to move from a reader to a professor in the British system, or from an associate professor to a full professor in the North American and the Australian system, then you will have to move institutions. So for a woman to be promoted, it's interesting, isn't it? For a woman to be promoted, she has to move institutions. Now, there are particular nations that encourage this internationalisation and foreign, inverted commas, staff. Switzerland has the highest percentage of foreign academics at 57% of their system, but the UK, the US, Sweden, Australia and Canada are running between 30 and 50% of their academics are international or indeed foreign academics. The Netherlands, Germany, France, Belgium and Denmark are running between 10 and 30% of their academics as foreign nationals. And the very interesting figure, and this was a surprise for me, the nations that have less than 10% of international academics are Brazil. That really surprised me. Brazil, Spain, Japan, Italy and India. And it is interesting that India in particular is now implementing an internationalisation program. That's important. So an array of posts, particularly in the very hard sciences, are heavily reliant on funding streams. So this means that postdocs that are going to be available are going to be between 1 and 5 years. So you're going to have a post for a year or 2 or 3 or 5. And this has become really the new reality for many of our colleagues in the harder edge of the sciences. And there have been some really debilitating studies about the breakup of families and mental health concerns from these type of cycles of endless postdocs of 1, 2, 3, 5 years. And that's one of the advantages, I would argue, about maintaining a balanced teaching and research role. A lot of you have asked me about the postdoctoral experience and whether you should go to a teaching, what's called a balanced role, teaching and research. And I always say to you, look, the balanced role is more secure. And I tell you why. You can simply do more for the university. So, one of the greatest ways you can make money for your university is to be an outstanding teacher of first year students and stop attrition. They're the most valuable academics in our institution. So if you're an outstanding teacher and you're an outstanding researcher and you take administration and management seriously and do the work carefully, then you're very valuable to your institution because you can turn your hand to a diversity of roles. Also, and this is again really important for those of you out there, life warning here about those of you who are actually also married to an academic. So you're an academic and your spouse is an academic. Team, advice from the old girl, decide to go to nations with spousal policies. Now, Australia has a diabolical history of managing husband and wife academics. This country is just notorious for how badly it handles husbands and wives, partners, gay, lesbian partners, very, very poor. So if this is your situation, then do think about moving to Canada. Canada has fantastic spousal policies, great country, great policies, great pay, fantastic place. Also, Nigeria and South Africa are thinking very strongly about these spousal policies. So if you don't want to leave Australia and you have a spouse then that's an academic, I would advise you think about regional universities, because the regional universities in Australia have a lot more fluidity and flexibility in employment practices, so spousal opportunities are more likely to be available in the regional universities. So there are lots of challenges as you're picking up from academic mobility. One is a misunderstanding of your qualifications. So put bluntly, the bachelor, the master's, the PhD means different things in different nations. So there might be a lack of understanding of your context, and it's about you as an individual academic learning about the nation to which you are moving. It's also shown by a really fascinating study by Tanya Monroe recently that research commercialisation is restricted by academic mobility. So creating knowledge takes an incredibly long time, and if staff move, then the research that they create in one place will create a payoff for another university. So you've done all the heavy lifting in one institution and it's published just as you move to another one. Academic turnover in Australia is a very interesting beast. I love reading the studies about this, and it's showing that about 30% of A-level academics turnover in any 1 year, and that's not a surprise because they tend to be short-term contracts. But more interesting to me is only 9% of E-levels, that is professors, only 9% of professors in Australia leave in any given year, and that's actually internationally low. And there might be reasons for that that you can think about. But what we learn from this story, I think, particularly if we apply mobility theory to it, is the best staff move, because they're more likely to be offered alternative jobs and alternative positions. They're more visible to other institutions that simply go, thank you very much, we're going to employ that person. But what's amazing is patents, and indeed the new phrase research impacts, are developed over the incredibly long term. So this means universities, because of the internationalisation of the system, can develop an academic to a certain stage and then they simply leave just at the point that that's going to pay off. So the best scholars move, the worst scholars cannot. But this isn't just about academic lives or academic careers, is it? It's a much bigger issue for us all. And there are costs to mobility for individuals, for families, for relationships. And if you commit to mobility, then you will live away from your family and your friends through the bulk of your academic career. Now, you're going to meet terrific, fantastic new people, but your life might feel a bit diffused. It might feel a bit fragmented. But my belief, as I've said to every single one of you, is you have a right to make a living. And you have a right to make a good living, to be able to create the best conditions for yourself and for your family. And of course, those great conditions may or may not be in Australia. you have to really think about, and this is the hard bit, you have to really think about what is important to you. Is it income? Is it security? You also have to think about your level of ambition. Who do you want to be? And I wanted to finish this vlog today on a personal note, if I can. This is all very personal and very real to me, and I'll tell you why. Most of you know I've worked in 9 universities in 4 countries. So academic mobility has been the attendant of my professional life. And I have met the best people on this planet. I have worked with the best colleagues. I have taught the best students. I've had an absolute bloody ball. And I've gained experience and expertise that I would never have gained if I had stayed in Australia. And that's a truth. The benefits to me have been incalculable. And if you're saying, oh, Tara, is that the case? Let me just present some facts to you. I gained my first full-time academic post by leaving Australia. I gained my first chair and professorship by leaving Australia. I gained my first head of department role by leaving Australia. And I gained my first research leadership role over an institution by, no surprises here, leaving Australia. So what this diversity of experience has meant is I've moved through a whole series of leadership roles. So when I land in a new university, I know exactly what's happening. I know exactly what's going to happen. It takes me no time to get myself organised. By about lunchtime on my first day, I'm cool and I'm ready to roll, because everything that could have happened has happened. Every policy that's being implemented, I've already seen succeed or fail. All the failures that are occurring, I've seen how that story ends. So I know about policy and I know what happens when it goes well or not so well. And it means I'm able to land in a place and in a job and pretty quickly be successful. And I enjoy places. I arrive, I love place, I get to know people, I have a fantastic time. But also I'm not evangelical about any place on this planet, because I know, look, I have a great time, I try and contribute as much as I can, work as hard as I can, but then I know the next job will come up and off we go again. But there are some sad moments in this story. 99% of my friends do not live in Adelaide, but can I say through social media I'm able to keep in contact with them every single day, and social media has made a real difference to my life and the context of my life. And there is a real sense when I return to cities that I've lived in and I've loved, that you almost feel the ghost of your former self walking with you. You almost feel like the life you could have lived is hovering around you. It's a very odd experience. And I was only really aware of the cost of all of this when I travelled to Manchester last October. And this was the first time I returned to Manchester since we left in December 2012. And I just conducted this amazing interview with Kevin Moore, Dr. Kevin Moore, who was then the head of the National Football Museum. Wonderful man, wonderful organisation in Manchester. And I just had a few days working at the top end of scholarship in my field. And in my field, of course, there's just nothing happening in Australia at all. So it was an amazing feeling being back and working at that top end of scholarship. It was great. And as I walked back from Urbis on that Friday afternoon, that autumnal Friday afternoon, and it wasn't raining in Manchester, which is a miracle. And as I walked back to my hotel that was just near Manchester Piccadilly station, I realised how much I had missed this city that I'd loved so deeply. And for the first time in my life, I had this sensory overload of the life that I could have lived. And I've never understood the phrase choking up, but actually walking back through Manchester that Friday afternoon with the buskers going and the old blokes 5 or 6 ciders in having a bit of a dance, and I sort of choked up, and I felt overwhelmed by the sense that I missed this place terribly. And that is the loss, and that's the pain of academic mobility, The opportunities are enormous, amazing, fabulous. The losses can cut you pretty deeply though, and it's about balancing the swings and the roundabouts. But what I would say to you right at the end of this vlog is that mobility gives you power. Use it for me. Use it. I wish you love, light and peace. Tia.